C, which is the 2013-2014 draft school calendar, which in our board packet we have some information from Dr. Littlefield.
Madam Chair, may I just ask a procedural question about is that just that we put that on there each meeting so that we're aware of the program?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No, really. I received a couple of questions. Last board meeting, you asked me about release days, and so I met with the principals. We did the hourly analysis, instructional time analysis. As I indicated to you in my memo, the limiting factor seems to be kindergarten, and what we would need to do to meet our hourly requirements for kindergarten. And I think once you do all the math associated with it, that you could do 4 release days and still, you'd reduce the amount of instructional time that the kids are getting to do the release days, but you'd have the minimum number of hours of instructional time with 4 release days. If that makes any sense.
Well, I mean, for kindergarten, you'd have the minimum, but for the others, you're over the minimum.
Yeah, kindergarten is the limiting factor.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I just had some questions. I guess some of them have been answered, but I read through all of the teacher comments that were presented, that were given to us, and sort of did a tally sheet of what most teachers want. And I think it's very clear that they want some early release days, if we put them in there. I had a question first. Dr. Littlefield, what are your thoughts about the workshops before school begins? Could you get by with 2 of those and to move another one throughout the year, either at the end of the trimesters or on that February 17th holiday, President's Day, as a workshop? I don't know if it's in the law or something.
I think, Mike, in order to understand that, the answer to that question belongs with Matt Benson, because you have to understand the history of where some of this stuff came from. It didn't come from me. It came from our teaching staff. So Matt, why don't you review where what has become our traditional calendar came from, including those 3 days before school starts and the day after the youngsters are gone.
Right, and Matt, before you do that, because the reason I'm bringing this up is because of many of the comments that I read have to do with some of those workshops, moving them either after a trimester ends for the elementary schools, or to move them to the President's Day and have a workshop then, and only 2 before school, or none after school, or how needed are those? Or, thank you.
I believe about maybe my first or second year here, I chaired a calendar committee with representatives from the teachers union, and it's from my second year here, because my first year here we had some early release days, and when we met with that committee in my second year here as an administrator, which would probably have prepared the 2010-2011 calendar, we decided early release days to get rid of them. And it wasn't me imposing it, I was just the chair. And we did that because research and people will tell you that you maximize academic growth when you have continued instructional time. And the goal was pretty much to get 22 full days in a month. And there's some months you can't do that because of holidays. So we decided overwhelmingly really that it would be a benefit if we could prepare and give 3 days before school starts. Now one of those days is, I'm not sure if it's in the new contract, but is contractually the teacher's day. And and the teachers come in, and the administration do not have any required activities of them. We're really out of their way. The other 2 days have been very beneficial because it really sets the tone for the year, and things that summer work that we've done or things we've talked about in our last day, preparing for implementing new programs and throughout that. We also do have a follow-up day, which I found very beneficial. I believe it's the last Friday in September in the Hooksett School District that we use as a workshop day. We decided that at the end of the year, teachers said, it'd be great to follow up. We have that early release day where we get together as a staff on the last day of school, and then again we follow up on the next day to close out the school year, but again set the expectations for the following year. I'm a big believer in, and I don't want to speak for the other administrators, but the delayed openings and early release days, it's a disruption in instructional time and continuity and consistency. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, and to tell you the truth, Mike, we didn't rehearse that, but I wanted to make certain that the board was aware where our current calendar came from. It came from a committee that was made up of teaching staff from Auburn, Candia, and Hooksett. They came up with a series of recommendations, and they did other things as well. Some really good work about looking at a 4-day school week, year-round school, and so forth. And when they were done, they had a series of recommendations. And do you remember, Matt, what I did with those recommendations?
So thank you.
Every one of them I recommended to the board and we implemented. So my only concern is, number one, that the board understand that what we have right now came from representatives of our teaching staff from all three communities. Because there's a great deal of benefit for having schedules that are consistent, so that if we're doing professional development work, we can pool our resources. So we're not terribly vested in what we currently have, but it was what was recommended to us, and that's therefore what we implemented. So those first day, and it was also a time where we were debating before Labor Day and after Labor Day start. When I came here, we had an after Labor Day start. So we moved that, and there was also a concern from the parent community about when we get out in June. So by moving those 3 days into before the youngsters began, it gets the kids out 3 days early. So that's a long and short, but those 3 days can go anywhere that you want as a board to place them. Well, excuse me, except for one of them. One of them is a teacher setup day according to contract, and I think that the principals would also need a day with the staff before the kids get here.
Yes, ma'am.
I can see the workshop days. There was some people asked for them to be moved, and I can see how they may be beneficial there and at the end. But I think separately from that, I think the early release days, I think it's another story. Early release days, to me, it's about 10 or 11 minutes less per module, or if it's middle school, per session or topic. And I think this year we need to implement the Smarter Balance and the Common Core standards. I think it's a great opportunity to have some early release days so that can be done with the teachers. And overwhelmingly, I don't have my little tally sheet here, but many teachers asked for the early release days back. I myself, having done both, I don't see how the early release really disrupts too much. I mean, in terms of maybe in the elementary schools it may, but seems to me that it's really beneficial to have it, and the teachers overwhelmingly want it. I don't know, I'd like to see, I'd probably wouldn't support a calendar for next year that doesn't have the early release days myself. Thank you.
I'm just wondering if, I support the calendar as is for this year. Do you have a deadline that you need to have this completed?
It's late right
Okay.
now because we've been
So-
waiting for Manchester to finalize its calendar, which is not finalized.
So I would support it as it is, but I'm just wondering if, at this point, if another committee for next year should, as things progress all the time, things change and shift, and if another committee might need to be created in order to look at the calendar going forward. Now I feel like we might be scrambling to try to fit these in. And secondly, just from parents' perspective that I've spoken to, early release days plays havoc for families, unfortunately. Not only that, for their student, because I think Mr. Benson says it right, it really disrupts their continual learning time. And so that concerns me too with putting in more early release days and being, governing for the taxpayers. How are we sure that I'm assuming that the early release days are so that they can stay and do workshops or work on their classrooms, instructions and things like that. But I just get a little bit concerned that that's not what would necessarily be done and be used for.
Can I?
Absolutely.
I have no doubt that our staff would use the time productively. I think my greater concern, and we're going to disagree on this, and I disagree with the teaching staff.
And it may back up a little bit, because I think that came out a little bit wrong, but I think the perspective can be, I think you run the risk of the perspective from parents, because parents get very frustrated with early release days.
Oh.
And I think that perspective is what I should say. I do have faith in all of our teachers that they'd be doing what they're supposed to do, but that doesn't always get communicated to the rest of the parents in the community.
We have a basic disagreement. So you have teacher comments, a lot of them that said we want early release days. And you have your educational leader saying, I don't want them. And there are a couple of reasons why. And it's the history of the district. It's really the history of the district. I was the superintendent of a district where we had every Wednesday as a release day. The history in this district is the parents call me to complain. And I heard it loud enough from parents the first couple of years that I was here that early release days are extremely disruptive to families. So I get the phone calls like, can I drop my kid off at your office this afternoon? Some of you who are sitting out there may have made one of those calls. I need to be responsive to a community, and I mean a school community, which includes parents. The second thing is, you will not convince me that in 2 hours, 3 or 4 times a year, anything productive is accomplished. The next thing is, the reason why the calendar committee recommended the elimination of the release days is they went through a school year, and I think they didn't find 1 month, or between the opening of school and Christmas, there wasn't 1 week that we had 5 full days. And I know this. The #1 indicator of student success is time on task. And the more time you take away from learning, the less productive our students are. I think that the professional development of the people who work in school districts is a major issue. And finding the time to do that is a major issue. But if this were a hospital, I wouldn't say that the best way to provide professional development for doctors is to take patients away from their service. So I'm more driven by what my concern is for kids than for any other family. So certainly, if in fact you decide to do it, we'll make it work. Understand that it's sort of the way the wind blows. You know, 3 years ago, we want to eliminate them. Now we want them back. And if you are going to survey our staff, I would suggest to you that you survey your parent public as well. Just based upon the experience I've had in books in private years. So that's my position as your educational leader. It doesn't make me right. There are opposing points of view. But continuity of instruction, I've heard it over and over and over and over again when I came here, and we've tried to address that.
Yeah, I guess I have 2 points. One would be, has any such committee reviewed the situation since the one that Mr. Benson was talking about? Because it seems to me that we made a major shift, and now we've had some time go by. We're getting some comments from teachers, I would say unscientifically, but has a committee formed to look at the results and look at the change that we made to have some type of recommendation that we could go by? That's one point that I would ask. The other one is, and I know this is probably out there, but is there any way to provide children staying in our facility which in doing things that are not educational instructional time, but in such a way to free up teachers? And what I'm thinking is, is there a way to have some teachers watching kids in the gym or the library or, in kind of a study afternoon kind of situation? I know logistically you couldn't free up the entire school because there'd be nobody left. But it does seem as though we have those hours to do what we want with because we're exceeding the state standard. And I do understand that sending kids home, particularly in the lower grades, could present problems for parents. But I'm just looking to see if, even if we could do that where it freed up half of the teachers one day and the other half the other day, whether we could get some benefit out of it. The thing that struck me the most about having the early release days is the flexibility to address issues as they come up through the year. And I think, well, this year the security issue was something that really came up, and I don't know that would have been addressed at an early release day. The implementation of Common Core, I would think along the way we're really going to want to check on that progress. So I do see some value in getting together throughout the year. But I would just go back to my question: has any committee convened to review the situation?
No.
I guess while we're on the subject, because I also saw comments regarding a couple of the holidays like President's Day. So while we're on the, and again, I do think that I am inclined to approve the calendar as it was originally presented for this year, but I do think that this has come to light that there are some real concerns with the calendar, and I think it's important that a committee is reformed for next year to really look at it, but not just for early release days. I think it should be considered whether some of the holidays, President's Day, Martin Luther King Day, are necessary. I was speaking to someone who's one of the school districts do go to school on Martin Luther King Day, It's not a full instructional day, and they do work on a very special project to honor that day. And I'm really wondering if those are things that we should be trying to implement if we're trying to, create a more rigorous educational process, which is part of the Common Core. So I just really feel like this has really brought to light some pretty major concerns that even I have as a parent and a school board member for our kids going forward. I'd like to really see next year a committee be formed and even maybe have a community member, a parent, and a school board member on that committee.
David, one of the issues that you brought up about having teachers, some teachers in a workshop and some teachers watching children. I do know that in the Dover School District, at the Garrison Elementary School, when they have early releases, their PTA sponsors an event that parents can pay the PTA to watch their children during that time that teachers are doing a workshop, and they bring in people like the Crystal Planetarium or Math Science. So there are other school districts that try to address that issue that affects parents. And I have a question for Dr. Littlefield. I understand the concept of why we have 3 days in August, but I repeatedly hear from parents about that we have 2 days of school and then we have a day off. When I first came to Hooksett, it was 3 days that first week, and then you had a 4-day week. Is there a reason that it's Thursday and Friday and not a different combination that week?
There is. There certainly is. If we didn't, you mean in the proposed calendar?
And the proposed calendar that we go workshop,
Yeah.
2 days, and why the workshops are not the previous day? Is there a contractual
Because
reason?
then our poor staff wouldn't have a summer. I mean, we'd be bringing them in, the week before that, 29, 28, 27, 26. We'd be bringing them in the week of the 19th of August. And they may have an issue with that. I mean, the other thing we looked at is because of what the work year looks like for teachers, and they plan their lives around, their work year, there are people who do have commitments in the summer, or who have vacations in the summer, or have done that. You start bringing into mid-August where they're going to be coming back, I think it's an issue.
Because I just looked at it, if you put their teacher workshop days as August 22nd, 23rd, and 30th, then had the students come to school for 4 days, 8/26 to 8/29, you would add 2 days to the calendar that you may be able to embed workshop days in there. And how much more could you get done if you had a whole day of different workshops?
Much more.
I mean, that would
You
be...
can get much more done. That works great for me. I think we would get killed by parents saying it's one thing to start before Labor Day. It's another thing to have a full weekend before Labor Day.
Well, it actually would be 4 days and they would get Friday off too. Like it would be a 4-day week.
Yeah,
Like,
but
is
that-
that something that a committee would look at? I repeatedly hear how difficult it is on kindergartners, first and second graders to jump in, and you're like, they're not easing into a schedule.
No, I think we need to be respectful and mindful that everybody has an opinion on the calendar. I even got, and I know it came from the staff at Memorial School, I even got the 2 most precious letters from kids that I responded to today, saying you're kicked out of the school district, which I kidding. And the 2 kids are asking me, can I make the summer vacation longer? And in one case, it was to go to parks and the beach, and in the other case, her birthday was on one of those days that we were there. So I think that when we start talking about calendar, everybody has an opinion on it. And there are a million variations on the theme. If it's time for a change, and maybe you should be looking at a couple of 4-day weeks, or a longer school day during those 4-day weeks, so you get your hours in 4 days, and you take that 5th day off, or whatever. Also understand that you've got to coordinate with your high school schedule, because we've got, how many days a year? We have 3 days a year that we can be out of sync with the high school, and it doesn't cost us any money. But if we're transporting kids to the high schools on days that we're not transporting kids K-8 and vice versa, it ends up costing you money. So there may be some, you may want to even consider, I'm not a proponent of it at all, but maybe it's time for that dialogue, whether we should have a school calendar that's based upon hours and not days. And there may be some ways of getting the school year into less than 180 days, freeing up full-time, that if our teachers are working 186 days, and we can get the school year into 178 days, we might be able to provide our teachers with full days of professional development. So a lot of opportunities may exist, but if you're going to study that, I think you should bring your teaching public, your parent public, your policymakers into it, and maybe come up with something that's new and bold and different.
I would just like to comment that one of the reasons I find myself here at the end of this process and not really sure is it's been the impression that if we added early releases, we had to add days to the calendar. And that has been stated here in the school board meeting. That has been discussed prior to this report that we got today.
Not from me.
Well, I beg to differ, because I've heard that stated here, that to add early release days, and I think Mrs. Corcus could comment on that if she'd like to, but that we would have to add days to the calendar, which made it very simple to me that I did not support early release dates. The fact that we can fit 4 early release dates in and not have to increase the calendar to me brings it back to the table for consideration. So I think we do need to discuss it, and I think we may be late, but we still need to look at it.
Does anyone else have anything to add? I would like to make a motion that we form, not for the 2014-2015 academic year, that we look at the calendar and set up a committee that has parents, teachers, administrators, and staff on, that we look into. I mean, because our teachers have brought up some excellent points. We've talked about days and what that means, and have a meaningful conversation about it. Anybody's interested in making this?
A second.
I just think I'll speak to my motion. I think that we've had a lot of interesting conversation about days and the positioning of days, and I might not have a complete understanding of what the first 3 days look like for teachers. I do know on the parent side, early releases do raise havoc in schedules, that you have to pick up your children 2.5 hours early, and if you're working full-time, you're negotiating who leaves work, who comes to work, and we need to look at the whole community when we make decisions. And we're under a time crunch here now, but I think for the future, maybe it's time to revisit that type of looking at the calendar.
I would certainly support the idea. I think that we should follow our procedure and motion to write a charge for the committee, and then have that charge approved by the board, so that it's very clear what the objectives are and who's going to participate, and we put in some reporting periods and so forth, so that when that committee starts out, there's a real clear expectation. Because I think particularly with calendar, you're right, you're going to get a lot of opinions, and I think you're going to need to pull that charge out and say, this is what we're authorized to do by the school board, and we've got to stay within that charge. And I've said this before, but on our high school assessment committee, it's come up many times that we look at that charge and say, these are our guidelines that we have to stay within. So I would certainly support that if we develop the charge first and approve the charge. I would certainly support the formation of that committee.
Typically, we set up a committee and then motion to create a charge for them before they meet.
Well, I don't know how we exactly can set up the committee unless we agree upon who's going to be on it, which should be the charge.
Well, typically, we set up a committee. We set up with that we're going to set up a committee. Then a charge is worked on, you come back and the board approves the committee. And in that time that they're writing the charge, some people come forward quickly and say, I'm interested in that. It doesn't matter what the charge is. I'm interested in the calendar. And we come back to the board. Board members write the charge.
I'm just wondering if I might make a suggestion. If you're interested in doing that, that you approve a charge like at your May meeting, and that will give us an opportunity in between now and then. I'm being a little selfish because I think I'm probably going to be the one that is going to write the charge. And right now we have 10 billion things on our plate that need to be done and done well. So if you said for your first meeting in May that you'll review a charge for a calendar committee, that would really allow us, give us some time to get some of this other stuff behind us and move into it well.
Sure. And I'm not opposed to one of the school board members writing the charge. It was very helpful the way that we did it. When I wrote the charge, you chimed in, some of the other school board members chimed in, and it all came together. I'm concerned because, as I mentioned earlier tonight, the High School Options and Opportunities Committee does not have a charge. And they're dealing with an issue that is virtually in litigation. We're from the breach, we have a breach of contract with Manchester, and I'm just concerned that we have committees operating without a charge, particularly on important issues. So I think we need to take the steps in the order that we should, so that it's very clear what the committee is to do and what they're not to do and so forth. So that's why I'm really focusing on the charge first. But I would have no problem helping on that charge. I don't know that I want to say I would write the whole thing, but if no one else does, I will.
There's currently a motion on the floor to form a calendar committee to look at the calendar for 2014, 2015. Is there any more discussion on that? Is there?
Well, I just want to say that I'm going to vote no and hope to defeat the motion and bring forth a motion to create a charge for that committee. So anyone willing to support the charge first, we ask to vote no on the motion.
All those in favor of forming the committee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
The motion carries 3-1.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to form a charge for the calendar committee.
Second.
And I'll speak to that motion for the reasons that I stated. I think that having that charge before the committee is formed or proceeds is important.
Is there any more discussion? All those in favor of forming, could you restate the motion, please?
Of creating a charge for the calendar committee, I guess is what we're calling it.
Form a charge for the calendar committee. That was the motion.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
So
So I think at this time we have to discuss who's going to create the charge. I've stated that if no one else wants to do it, I will volunteer to do it. So now's the time.
I would be willing to help. I've never done one. I have some experience with having done one, so I'd be willing to help. I just don't know if I want to write it all by myself.
Then I will nominate myself to write the charge for the calendar committee. Seeing no second?
Oh, we don't need a motion. We'll do it. We already made a motion to create a charge, so create one and we'll look at it. We'll create one and, maybe we'll put them together and get a good one, I don't think we need a motion.
Is there an agenda you want to place that on? March meeting, May meeting? Just so that I don't lose track of it.
Well, actually, I think we should place it on the next, why don't we place it on the next agenda so that I can either give my progress or perhaps we'll have some questions at that time. And then maybe I'll have a good feel for how to do it.
February 19th.
Yeah, I think that would, because I'm certainly going to be looking for input. And perhaps at the next meeting I can bring my ideas in a rough draft and folks should comment in, and maybe I can finalize it for approval.
Just one more quick comment. I don't want to belabor the point, but on early release days, I dare say that I don't have a smartphone, but if you looked up the schools that are considered the best in the nation, and you looked at some of the characteristics of those schools, that you would see we have a lot of workshop days for our teachers, 6, I guess. I think it is at Hooksett, and I think that's one of them. And I think also other professional development time and early release type of time, I think you would see those in characteristics. So that's all I'm saying. Thank you. So we're going to vote on this calendar tonight, even though I probably shouldn't say anything, and then we can get voted on, but I think we should vote on a calendar. And
Parents that call. People make plans to do anything else.
Do I have a motion on the calendar?
yes, so moved.
All those
Oh, wait, I
Need a
don't get a
second?
so moved.
Move to accept the calendar as
No, I understand, I didn't get a second. I understand the motion.
Okay.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any more discussion on the calendar? Yes,
I know I said I wouldn't say anything else, but even though I made the motion, I just think we have to vote on a calendar. I just don't think this is it. I think I can vote against my own motion, and I'll have to vote against it because they're the release days. But yeah, I just wanted to, I think we should vote on something, so, thank you.
All those in favor of approving the 2013-2014 calendar as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed,
No?
motion fails 2-2. Yes, ma'am.
I think we need a calendar. I'd like to make a motion then to have the superintendent add 4 early release days to this calendar and have that submitted to us for approval at our next meeting.
Second.
And again, as I stated before, I just think it's important that teachers want it. It's 2 hours less than the normal day. Students all still see the same teachers or subjects, and I think we should put it in there and not wait until next year's meeting.
And I'd like to chime in on something I commented on before. It's the 11th hour of discussing things. And I understand that we needed to wait for Manchester to finish its calendar so that we could sync with them. But I think some of these fundamental questions about early release days or not, we could have been discussing earlier in the year, where we had more time to to seek opinions and do things. So I feel that when we are against the wall, we still have to do our best to try to vote correctly and to hear those opinions. So I just hope that we can take, in the future, take every advantage to look at things as early as possible, at least the portions of it that we can, so that when we find the final pieces, we're pretty much lined up for what we're going to do. Thank you.
All right, and I don't mean to make things difficult. I know we are in the final hours, and I just, again, I think they should be in there, and the teachers too. And if transportation, if we have to meet up with Manchester's transportation, I know they have early release days. They had one today. Does that matter if it's earlier? That doesn't count like a day off would with Manchester?
No, because we're in session.
We're in session. Okay, thank you.
I just think that it's hastily being done to just add 4 early release days. I think we had good discussion. I think we realized that there is an issue, and I think moving forward next year, creating this committee, we're really addressing it. I just do think that it just hasn't been looked at just to add 4 early release days at this point in time. I really do think that this is not going to go over well with the families. Not just because it plays havoc, because that shouldn't be the only driving issue, but because I really do, the parents that I speak to feel that their children really lose out on that continuous learning process. There's just so many, they're always hyped up the day before, when they go on vacation and other things like that, that it's just valuable time lost for them.
Gotcha. I don't think it's unreasonable, Mike's motion to have the superintendent bring that back. That's 2 weeks from now. We may have a majority at that meeting, so we may, hopefully we could come out of that meeting with a calendar, and we could discuss those proposed dates. So I don't think that Mike's motion in any way is putting those dates in the calendar, but he's asking the superintendent to pick those dates so that we can consider them, I would think, against this calendar, and hopefully next week, the next meeting, make that decision. So to have it wait 2 weeks at this point to consider everything, I don't find that unreasonable.
So I just want to make sure that I understand. Your motion is to have Dr. Littlefield look at adding them in, and at that time we may also be able to, for all those people out there watching us, get some parental input on how an early release would affect them also. If we ask him to look into it and then we hear from 50 people that come here and aren't happy.
No, that's not my motion. My motion is for him to put 4 early release days into the calendar and bring that back to us as a proposal, as a proposed calendar, so then we can look at it and vote on it.
Madam Chair? I would say that our meeting process still does provide exactly for that input, because we offer first public input here, and anyone that wants to come and speak would be speaking before we vote on the calendar. And I think it's pretty clear here that I'm not settled that we need these 4 days. I think we need to consider it. So perhaps at the next public input or at the end of this meeting, people may decide to voice their opinion. So we do provide that avenue for public opinion.
Is there any more discussion? If there be no discussion, I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-1. Where we would add those pieces if we were to put them into the calendar.
I will enthusiastically implement the will of the board. I would just point out, because it's my job to advise you. I'm your education leader. I'm not sure what the purpose of those days are, so I don't know where to put them, because I don't know what you want to get accomplished during those 4 days. So I'll space them out, but it's not going to be, I won't be able to, like, why did you do this? Because I'm not sure what the intent is, or what the plan is, or what the content of that is, or what type of professional development we're going to offer, or who we're going to bring in. And so I will do that, but I just want you to consider that essentially what I'm doing is I'm just sticking in days, because the teachers want them, as opposed to a planned educational decision.
Madam Chair, may I speak? I would offer that it's not our position to decide what professional development is offered. I mean, that's certainly the administration's position. We're only to set policy and at this point to set the calendar. So I don't think it's incumbent upon us to suggest certain workshop topics and what type of time of the year they would be beneficial. I think that certainly is the administration's responsibility. Thank you.
My intent in voting to have it looked at was for this to be an opportunity for teachers to collaborate with each other, have data team meetings, have bling meetings, have, I'm not going to explain it the way Kevin Flurry did at a meeting I was at, but like where all the science teachers have a very difficult time meeting together to discuss how they're teaching science because of their varying schedules during the day. They've not afforded that opportunity during the day, that might be an opportunity on an early release day for them to do something like that, or for Google Docs training that helps them better use those programs. That was my intent in looking at it.
Yeah. And from the comments that I've read from the teachers, a lot of them would like to maybe have extra time. I don't know if some of the workshop days already planned are for implementation of the Common Core standards and that kind of thing, and the Smarter Balance assessments that are coming up. I think we've been told how complicated that is, and we need a facilitator for that. And I think that's one thing that they could use that time for too, is to plan some of those implementations or facilitations for that.
Will be another discussion. We will move on to the email notification system.